All right.
You got a nice like darkish background. It's cool. It's a little ominous. I like it.
It's been an ominous week.
I know. So welcome everybody to another episode of Professional Novice with Ali Rizvi. My name is Ali Rizvi, and with me again, and we've had him back several times. It seems like everybody really likes hearing what he has to say.
Third round is the charm.
It is, yeah. We got my friend Mookie Spitz. Mookie Spitz is a strategist. He works in healthcare, nonprofit, and is a political strategist as well. He's worked briefly for the Andrew Yang campaign as well. So he's got some really interesting perspectives on all this. And, you've heard the introduction of the previous things, but here we go. We're live. So we're going to be talking about, like, it's been a hell of a week. We're going to be talking about everything that happened this week. And whatever questions you have, put on your mask. You don't have to put on your mask. It's okay. It's all right. Don't do it. It's weakness. It's weakness.
Keep going. I got this.
And there's a lot going on. So definitely throw in your questions, ask your questions. We'll be monitoring that here as well. So here we go. After this week, I mean, people don't really remember, but this is the week that Trump's tax returns came out. Things that people have been waiting for 4 years. Tax returns came out. New York Times exposed it, found out that, he barely paid any tax. He paid like $750 for 2 years, 2016, 2017. So we found that out. And then there was a first Trump-Biden debate, and that was what was that? Anyway, we'll get into that too.
It was amazing.
It was amazing. Actually, I was riveted the entire time. I was just watching. It's crazy. And then finally, how did this all end? A couple of days after the Trump-Biden debate, Trump gets diagnosed with COVID. He gets diagnosed with COVID. And, pretty much within 24 hours, he's taken to the hospital. He's taken to Walter Reed Medical Center. He's there right now. And the latest thing is he was doing a photo op with a bunch of Secret Service people in his car.
Yeah, motorcade. The motorcade. The guy is on Regeneron antibody treatment.
Yeah, remdesivir.
He's on the res stuff, and he's on steroids, and he's in a motorcade. Nice work.
Yeah, and he's on a motorcade. What he's not on, actually, was not taking is hydroxychloroquine. So, we're going to probably mention that.
Yeah, that's a big question, right? They got left off the list.
Yeah. So I was saying previously, Spitz, as you know, that I thought that if the pandemic was in the headlines, right, that helps Biden. And if there's anything else like the violence and all that other stuff in the headlines, and that helps Trump. So a lot of that was tested since the last time we spoke. It was tested by the polls, of course. We're going to talk about that a little bit. I know you're skeptical about it. But just overall, the conventional wisdom right now is saying that, that Trump is, with all of this stuff going on, he's on the trajectory to almost certain defeat. But we still have 4 weeks left. Long time in U.S. politics. And for those who don't know, who haven't seen the previous episodes, I hope you do watch my previous interviews with Spitz. Spitz has made arguments here in the past about his skepticism of the polls. Even though the polls are showing a really, really good rosy picture for Biden, we'll talk about now that, we're 4 weeks out. It's probably, in my opinion, I don't think it's too early to start looking at the polls right now, even as a predictive thing. So in any case, let's start with it. What do you think of this week in general? What's going on, Spitz? Tell me, break it down. What's going on? You have talked about this from a brand strategy perspective, that Trump has a brand, right? And how does this fit into his brand, everything that he's doing right now? I know parts of it do. The COVID diagnosis, which I guess he couldn't really help. Like, how does that disrupt or go along with his whole brand plan?
Well, there's factors that he can control and does control, which is how he presents himself to the world, the Trump brand, everything he's famous and infamous for that ultimately propelled him into the White House, whether you like the guy or not. And then there's external factors that come into the picture, some of them calculated, some of them random. And most significantly, it's a question that we need to ask ourselves in terms of how he reacts to this maelstrom and whether, A, he sticks on his brand, he's true to the personality that he's created that's engendered the success that he's enjoyed so far. Is he veering off that? Is he reactive to it? And lastly, is it ultimately beneficial for what he's trying to accomplish, which in this case is win the election a month from now? So if we break it down, as you mentioned, taxes came out. He's audited for about $79 million of some shady deductions that he did in the past. Could go up to $100 million if he's found at fault and he has to pay the interest on this situation with the IRS. He's in debt, they're calculating, as much as $500 million to creditors that are unknown, right? Could be anybody. Yeah. And he's got that huge tax situation. And what was his response? Went straight up, fake news, right? Standard response.
Yep.
But he was lucky in the sense that he had the distraction of the imminent debates. And we've been hearing about his taxes, and he's been evading the issue of releasing them. They got released from whatever source by the New York Times. Fake news, deflection to the debate. So far, so good for Trump. He hits the debates and he goes in full steam ahead. It's been called generously and poetically a shit show, right? Non-stop interruptions, 148 interruptions. Poor Chris Wallace, right? We could talk about him and his capacity to moderate, control the kindergarten room. If you can't do it in the first 5 minutes, forget about it. It's all done.
Who could have done it?
And it was done. It was done. Trump just steamrolled the hell out of not only Biden, but Wallace too, right? From any point of view, it was a disaster for democracy. It was a disaster for discourse. The American public has no idea what the issues are. They have no real clear-cut idea as to where everyone stood. And that, again, to the points I've been making in our prior podcasts, were entirely calculated and strategic on Trump's part. There was a lot of talk that he went in with zero rehearsal. I don't believe it. Most folks don't believe it. Apparently, even Rudy Giuliani, Chris Christie, several folks got involved. They did role playing, and he was locked and loaded, and he knew exactly what he wanted to do. And what he wanted to do is what he pulled off, which is not give Biden an opportunity to criticize him essentially for anything, because he kept getting punched in the face, and show the world, and especially the American electorate, that Trump owns the libtards. And in this case, it's the libtard king, Uncle Joe Biden. So he came out swinging nonstop. Chris Christie himself said in retrospect that it was too hot, right? He might have rubbed some folks the wrong way. Initial results from even the electoral swing state feedback is largely negative. He seemed to have hit people the wrong way. And to your point, the polls over the last week have been resoundingly not in his favor. We're seeing a shift from maybe 7+ Joe to 14+ Joe. A lot of these metrics are coming out of the swing states Trump needs to win. So the overall result from the debate, if you look at the metrics, just the results of almost all the polls indicate that the debates were not favorable to Trump. That regardless of what you say about either one's performance, they were net negative for the Donald J. Trump cause.
So I want to say, just interject for a second.
Yeah, please do.
Interruptions, I guess.
Yeah. Interrupt me. Come on.
Yeah. Bring it on. No, I actually think I agree with you that Trump was on brand. I think that when he was in the debates, he did come across as strong. He came across as dominating, and came across as like he's steamrolling over Biden. Biden can't get a word in edgewise. Neither can Chris Wallace. But here's the thing: like even if it's on brand, does it resonate beyond the people who love that brand? Because they've known him for 4 years. in all honesty, what you saw in the debate isn't really. I mean, people thought maybe he'd be more measured in this kind of formal setting, but um, but the thing is that everybody who knows him was not surprised by what he did at the debate. It wasn't surprising. And the people who love him for it, they love him for it in the debate. So the brand strategy thing is on point. The question
100%, all the way. Actually, he took it to an 11, right? He surprised even his ardent supporters.
Yeah,
and he might have actually had the Rona in his system.
Right. But when
right? He might have been jacked by the Rona because apparently the dude was probably positive already based upon the information we're getting. He rolled into that bait. He was already coronavirus positive.
Yeah, and I can't even tell the difference. So I can't tell if he's Trump on Adderall, Trump without Adderall. Who knows?
Right. Trump on coronavirus, Trump Trump not.
But ultimately, the thing is, the other side is also true. The people who have not liked him for this kind of thing, this brand, when they say that yes, he came in, he did what he was supposed to do, but he overplayed his hand. He when he overdid it. Okay, specifically, like the demographics that he actually needs, right? And this is something his own campaign knows. The Democratic campaign knows. Everybody knows the demographics that he needs. The people that are peeling off of him, the seniors, especially the suburban women. When Biden talked about his son, Joe Biden, and he literally said, "I don't know, I know Hunter," and he got cocaine. It's like all the stuff he was saying. Like that is. I was reading about some of the focus groups, right? And of course, they're focus groups; they're not polls, but everything kind of aligns together. It's not just the polls. Just even anecdotally, there's one woman who said that when she heard about Joe Biden, she was feeling emotional, and she was she felt like she was crying, and then he came in and he just did this completely psychopathic, devoid of empathy comeback to it, which was insane. So yes, his base. He's going to rally around him. If he wants to improve turnout across his base, he wants to energize them, sure, that's fine. But it does seem like in swing states where he needs those swing voters and the independent voters, he probably overplayed his hand. And the people who didn't like him and who were actually waiting to see, like, okay, I don't like this. I like his policies. I don't like the guy. Like those kinds of people, he seems to have lost a lot of their votes. Right. So, as in, it is true that he's on brand.
Okay, all right. So let's dissect it. Is he on brand? Yes or no? 100%. He was Trump dialed to 11. Okay, so spot on there, right? So if you're following the flow of his trajectory, he's on point. To your point, what's the result? Is it favorable or not to him getting elected? The polling and the metrics almost unilaterally conclude that it was not favorable. To your point, he overdid it. He blew any kind of empathy card. The adjectives and descriptions that have been coming out of the swing state key voters in these little Zoom meetings that have been held by Face the Nation and Meet the Press, right? Mm. They went out there and they just asked people, and the responses have been almost entirely negative. Egomaniacal, selfish, insensitive, rude.
Well, he came across in all, this is what I think, and I turned out that I'm not the only one, but I was watching this with my 14-year-old niece from Texas. So she's visiting us from Texas, which is currently actually a swing state, and my mom. And my mom is she was a big Bernie fan. She does not like Biden. If she was American, she'd probably be undecided, right? And she's a senior as well. So they're kind of watching this, and he seemed scared. Like their perception of what is he comes across as really insecure. Like when he's especially he would start talking about when he was talking about Hunter Biden's money, and he got the money from the wife in Moscow and all this stuff. Like it's kind of right now, 4 weeks into it, there's like a second wave or third wave or whatever of COVID happening. People sending their kids to school. There's the death count went over 200,000, People are, I think there's like 40 million people who are at risk of eviction. Now there's a homelessness crisis that's on the horizon, all this stuff. And then he's talking about Burisma, and it's like so that is something that felt really out of touch. It's like, what is he scared of? Why does he keep on being rude? That was the stuff that I was hearing in my sample size of 2.
Yeah, and my own kid, who's 13, he watched the debate, and I asked him, "Who do you think won?" And he said, "I think Biden won.
Yeah.
Trump was just an asshole."
Yeah, he was an asshole. That's the thing.
My 13-year-old. But
Yeah.
what I would mention as counterpoint, though, in terms of his strategy, is he was trying to portray strength and power, owning the libtard king. And is it memorable after the smoke clears in an emotional, instinctive way when you're sitting at the polling booth, or when even you get your mail in and you've got the 2 choices and the 2 names hover in front of your face? Which name are you emotionally or instinctively drawn to?
Mm-hmm.
And is it really a factor of cognitive connection? Is empathy really paramount? Or, as you mentioned, is the nation in a state of crisis and almost instinctively yearning for that perception, at least, of strength? Do we need a strong leader? Do we need a resilient leader? Do we need one who comes out punching and swinging? Or do we need a leader? And even visually, when you saw the 2 of them together, Trump was characteristically orange,
Yeah.
almost glowing, right?
Yeah, Biden was pale.
Biden looked pale, and he looked withdrawn. And it's going back to the Kennedy-Nixon comparison that you had brought up before. Nixon was similarly ghost-like, and Kennedy was effusive and youthful and colorful and vibrant.
Well,
and
Kennedy
just visually, Biden looked almost ghost-like. And his manner instinctively throughout, he was always on the defensive, which was, again, Trump's strategy. Just by constantly interrupting him, he tried to trigger him. It really only worked once or twice. So I think part of Trump's strategy was to get Biden to snap. And analogous to Hillary back in 2016, just like she was counseled to chill out, not be a bitch, Biden was counseled to not let Trump get under his skin. And this was even turned into a parody on Saturday Night Live, if you saw that. And he's like, Jim Carrey was playing Biden. It's like, well, gotta chill out. He's like building up, and he's talking to himself. So he's projecting what
if
we
you
all
haven't seen that, everybody, go and watch the Saturday Night Live version of this.
He's projecting what we all intuited, which is basically what I'm verbalizing now, which is Biden was coached and trained, in a sense, to muzzle himself,
right.
and let him keep taking those hits, right?
Yeah. So basically, Biden was told that apparently the way that he was coached in this debate, and I think that he did pull this off in most cases. Like they had told him, you're not really going to get much of a word in edgewise, but what you need to do is hit and pivot. So he comes at you with something. Say that's not true, that's BS, and then turn to the camera.
Don't dive in.
Yeah, right. Don't dive in. Once you hit like one quick hit in response to Trump, and then turn to the camera and talk to the people. Right, that was his strategy, and I think to the extent that he was allowed to do that, he was able to do that for at least to a moderate scale, but I think adequately enough to have a good result for it. Let me say, we're getting a couple of comments here, so. Muscal is saying I already voted by mail today. So this is let's bookmark this because I want to talk about this. I actually think that Democrats need to start going out and voting in person. We know what precautions to take, but Democrats really need to go out. I think the mail thing is great, Muscal. I think that's great that you did it, but we'll talk about this next. She's also saying that Trump must go to jail for tax avoidance. Well, let's beat him first. If he wins this time, he can get away with anything. All that bullshit about even the president is not above the law. Well, he is. Like we know that.
Yeah. Let's stay focused, right?
Yeah, let's stay focused.
Attack,
So
tax evasion, the Stormy Daniels related election fraud.
yeah,
There's a long list that this guy can get nailed for. But the
right.
fact is, he's the sitting president. He's the incumbent. And he's got a shot in November, which is what we're talking about.
Yeah. So yeah, let's get to
Not
that
just a
first.
shot, but what I'm saying, a much higher probability of success than most on the left think he's got.
You know, this is it is an interesting point though, because this is the kind of thing where it just happened to any other candidate, this would be the one thing that could sink them. But with Trump, there is so much that even the really, really important stuff like his tax avoidance is going to go. And it's like, well, that's not important. But here's the next thing. So let's talk about this first. So Carol is saying, how do you think Trump's personal COVID-19 illness and recovery will impact his campaign and the election at all? So after this debate, you know, which we've talked about, I think
boom, boom, boom. All the electricity is flying around, right? We've never seen anything like this before, ever. People are saying the end of democracy, the end of civility, the debauchery of the American presidency has finally reached its apex.
Yeah.
Then what? Then he gets COVID. He tests positive. He's in the hospital. He's on treatment.
Yeah.
You can't even make this stuff up. We thought the guy was invincible. At least I did.
Well,
it's like The Sixth Sense. Remember when Bruce Willis gets shot and then the scene cuts right away to him standing? It says 6 months later and he's standing out in a nice fall Boston kind of yard. And your mind immediately puts two and two together. Well, he got shot, but he survived. He's cool. Yeah. He's on it. So your implicit bias is that Bruce made it. And then the entire adventure unfolds. And then when you find out that he's actually a ghost, you're like, wow. And it was all pivotal.
Killed it for people who haven't seen it. But anyway,
based on the moment, who didn't see The Sixth Sense, right? So anyway, it's based on the notion that your mind is tricked by this transition. And then after you're convinced once or twice that it is what it is, then you roll with it. And when you're proven otherwise, it becomes such a shock. So in retrospect, it's obvious that the guy would eventually get COVID because of the horrible practices, even in the White House. No masks, relying entirely on testing.
That Rose Garden event.
The Rose Garden event, the super spreader event, right?
Are you saying, so, you know, Doug is saying he doesn't have, you said that he's got a shot. You know, we're not saying he has a really good shot. I'm just saying
I think he has a good shot.
You think he has a good shot?
Really good shot, which is why Ali brought me here. Thanks for asking.
You said invincibility. You said that, you know, we thought he was invincible. You said that in the past tense.
I'm referring to him getting COVID, not losing the election.
Not losing the election.
So I'm talking about like the Brazilian PR guy who was positive stood right next to him. Remember that moment? That's the Sixth Sense moment when COVID came so close to him so often, and you figure there's no way this guy is going to get it. He even felt that way. Mm-hmm. And his crass disregard for social distancing, for mask wearing. We talked about why it's strategically important for him to differentiate from the liberals in this kind of way. And that, in a sense, explains this horrible public health disaster that he's helped create. But at the same time, we felt he was invulnerable. And then, surprise, surprise, is the ultimate October surprise. He's in the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Getting experimental treatments.
Yeah.
The polyclonal antibodies, the Regeneron. And then...
So let's go back to the motif of Trump being strong. He did everything he could to distract from anything negative about his presidency. Fighting, interrupting, showing that he was the leader who could own the libtards and move the country forward. And then
he made fun of Biden for wearing a mask.
He made fun of Biden for wearing them. Of course he did.
A big mask, yeah.
And then, boom, the dude seemingly is punched in the face by actually getting the disease and being hospitalized for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
How's that for a branding challenge? How's that for a challenge for the campaign?
Mhm.
Now, I'll go even further and say not only does the guy have a solid chance in November, but he's already turned this thing around. The
Mhm.
motorcade with the Secret Service, where he's under treatment, he's taking steroids, antibodies, the new care.
Mhm. Yeah.
Gets into a bulletproof limo and rolls up the street to wave to his fans. Releases 2 videos to show the nation that he's still in control, under control, and doing fine. And even hints in the last video, if you saw it, that he now really understands the disease and that we should be on the lookout because we're going to learn some stuff from this. In a
So Spitz,
sense,
I don't think
he's
that plays
going to
well.
show us. He's
I
going to
don't
show us.
I don't think that last video when he says, "Oh, now I really understand the disease," I don't think that plays well. Now, if you're going on the assumption that the vast majority of the U.S. electorate is just a bunch of complete idiots, right? Now, which they're not. Okay, we gotta have, we know that they're not. Okay, there's a good amount of them that are. Okay, but we're not saying that the majority of them aren't.
They elected him president.
Okay, they
He's
elected
the 45th president of the United States.
63.
After all the shit that happened from
63 million people elected him president. That was less than Dukakis. That was
I
less
don't
than Mitt
care.
Romney.
He doesn't care either.
We're
And I just want
talking
to
about
clarify: we're two liberals here who really want Biden to win.
yeah,
And
we really do.
I'm a big libtard too. So anyone listening, don't think I'm pounding on my chest, Trump
You're like
kind
a
of guy.
leftist liberal.
I'm the libtard scared out of my wits that this crazy mofo can actually win, and that we got to start paying attention to what he's doing and then counterpunching it.
Right.
And falling back on complacency, having either to do with the polling or with the shenanigans, is dangerous.
Yes,
and what we're trying to reveal is that there's method to this maniac's madness. And he exhibited it during the debates, even if he just shot his load. And already the PR that this guy is doing as a COVID patient is astonishing, and it's a harbinger of what's to come.
Okay, so
this shit's changing minute to minute.
What you're saying,
day after, he's going to turn this whole thing around.
That's right. But what you're saying is that he's doing this PR right now, and that is true. He is doing PR. But the way that I look at the PR is the way that I sign some wedding guest books. I'm like, of all the weddings I've been to, this is definitely one of them, right? So he is doing PR. Now, but when he does that video and he says, "Oh, now I understand the disease now that I've been hit with it," there are more than enough people out there who are looking at this and they just instinctively think, they're like, "Oh, now you understand the disease that you're going through it." I mean, it's a pretty normal meme for people to think that, okay, look at this asshole. Like,
that's the brain talking. You're a smart guy, Ollie.
No, it's not the brain. Look, the brain is talking. When the brain says, "Okay, this is PR, this might resonate, this is making sense, it makes logical sense. Now he's gone through it, he has the experience." But when you go emotionally with it, right? When you know emotionally and you've seen this thing devastate you, whether you lost your job, whether you lost a loved one, whether whatever way COVID affected you.
Now he's one with us. He's a victim like we are.
No, Spitz. Okay, it's like once you go through that and then you see somebody and they're like, "Oh, so when I was going through all this shit in the last 6 to 8 months, right, you didn't do anything. And now that you, Mr. Billionaire or supposed billionaire, are going through it yourself, now you're saying that, oh, I understand it and we're going to fight it." What were you doing when the rest of us were going through? We couldn't go through motorcades. We couldn't go to Walter Reed. We weren't airlifted.
Don't matter.
A lot of us
He's
didn't
the
even
leader,
have
man.
healthcare. Yeah, but that's how this is. I'm talking about emotionally. The emotional reaction to this, right? For a lot of people, is not going to be that. They're the only people. This is a question. Okay, so the debate, the COVID thing, all of the stuff that he's doing, and I knew that we were going to totally disagree on a lot of the stuff.
Well, that's a good thing.
Yeah,
I mean, that's why it makes it interesting.
It is, it's that's the atmosphere in the air right now. But with all of these things going on, I lost my train of thought. But I think I just don't see right now. Sorry. My question to you is, how is this resonating beyond the people who already like him and who are going to defend him no matter the people with Trump fellatio syndrome? You know, I call, you got Trump derangement syndrome. This is Trump fellatio syndrome, where they just cannot stop choking on, that fat orange Cheeto. But the or Cheeto sausage, actually. But the thing is, they how does it resonate with the suburban moms that he needs, the seniors that he needs, the college educated women that he needs, the non-college educated women that he needs, because that's a new sort of demographic after Trump, the split, the college and non-college that came after 2016, that they're extensively, looking at now. How does it go beyond that? Like,
rationally, it doesn't at all. Zero. You're absolutely correct. You look at it through your higher brain function. Yeah. None of this makes any sense.
I'm talking about emotionally. Just looking.
Yeah, I know. I'm getting there.
Okay.
So your cerebrum, even your cerebellum, but we're when you get down to the reptilian brain, right? Then it might do some triggering. As a counterexample, let's look at Brazil with Belisario, okay? And it's an interesting Bolsonaro. Thank you. Yeah. So Bolsonaro. So very, very similar. The guy was in full swing COVID denial to the point where Brazil ranked up there in terms of mortality rate and spread, almost as bad as us, which is saying a lot. Then he got the disease. He had relatively mild symptoms, and then he bounced back. How did his polls do? Or how is his favorability looked at by most of the Brazilian people? Not everyone, but most. Way up. So it might not be a reasonable counterexample, but it provides insight into that reptilian reaction to what's considered a strong and decisive and fuck you kind of leader in a nation that's full of turmoil. And the more unrest a country exhibits, and the more agitation and anxiety the populace feels, if you look at this situation historically, the more people tend to gravitate toward a leader who is perceived as fearless and strong and indefatigable. And that's what I'm going with here. And what I kind of sense in terms of being a real risk going into November. And all of his shenanigans put him into this category of this instinctively brutish and brutal kind of figurehead. Right. And with that, just to finish, and I'll pass it back to you. We don't have to interrupt each other like they do. What this does is it triggers a feeling of security. It's paradoxical and ironic, but again, there's endless historical precedent that when a population feels abused or society seems to be in chaos and turmoil, and in this case, Trump himself has done nothing more than to add to the feeling of insecurity, destabilization, the fact that we can't believe anything that we hear. It's an old Russian tactic. It's used all the time on the part of our enemies. Now it's used in the Oval Office. He's helped to create this environment stoked with fear, apprehension, and divisiveness. Yeah. And he's jumping on top of that, just like Walter Payton used to leap over the front line with the ball, right? And run with it. It's his brand. It's his strategy. I'm not certain it's going to work. But if we want to come to understand method to his madness, and if we want to counter program it appropriately, we need to be aware of what he's feeding into and off of. The debates, and now this COVID thing with the cavalcade of madness going out from the hospital. The Walter Reed physicians are freaking out.
Yeah.
What the hell is going on? This is truly a third world set of behaviors. But that's exactly the point. That's what we should be scared of.
There's something called the VIP syndrome. It's a real thing.
Yeah.
Where when you have a great example of this is Michael Jackson. So Michael Jackson had his own, personal physician. That guy, I can't remember his name now, Conrad something. And, he asked him to give him propofol anesthetic to help him go to sleep. And, that's eventually OD'd and he died of it. Trump apparently is, I just saw this. I just got a New York Times alert, quote, "They're throwing the kitchen sink at him." Here's what medical experts are saying about President Trump's treatment. So they're throwing the kitchen sink at him, and it seems like he is maybe egging them on to pretty much give him everything, the most powerful.
Sounds like it. Sounds like it.
What happens is doctors get, you've got the president of the United States there, and he's telling his personality. He's had 4-star generals completely shut up and not say anything and succumb to him. So, what's a bunch of doctors, Walter Reed, right? So they're giving him Regeneron, experimental therapy, lots of data still missing. Safety hasn't been fully tested. Remdesivir, which is, it's been shown to work. It's been out there. It's been used for other
FDA emergency approval for that. So
absolutely, yeah.
That's more legit. That's more legit than the Regeneron antibody stuff, right?
But we still don't know how well it works. And then he's been given dexamethasone, which has also shown some good results, like with people with COVID.
For later stage, right?
Later stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so he's getting this stuff. We've been hearing that he's getting especially dexamethasone, for the patients who are serious, got oxygen problems, need ventilation, things like that. And now they're saying he's going to be discharged tomorrow. And Mark Meadows, his chief of staff, apparently Trump is furious at him.
Oh, yeah, that was bad. Mark, you blew the shot. You're telling people that the vital signs seem concerning. That shows weakness. That shows weakness, Mark. That's off-brand. Trump never apologizes and never shows any weakness. What are you doing?
Mark is the one
he wants succession. Right, yeah, you got Trump, you got Pence, you got Nancy Pelosi. If Nancy Pelosi's contested, who's number 3? It's Mark Meadows. Maybe he's thinking that.
Yeah. So all of this stuff is happening. Apparently, he's going to get discharged from the hospital tomorrow and go back to the White House. Whatever it is. There's there are all of these things happening. I just don't. For me, I really think as long as COVID's in the headlines, right? The hypocrisy element is in the headlines.
Sure.
Lindsey Graham, I don't know if you saw the debate between him and Jamie Harris in South Carolina. South Carolina is apparently a swing state now. Trump and Biden are tied in South Carolina. Okay, not North Carolina, over there. That's South fucking Carolina. So
right.
They're tied there. And this guy, Jamie Harris, I hope I'm getting his name right, Jamie Harrison, and this Lindsey Graham, he's been calling him out on his hypocrisy, and he's been doing it brilliantly because, what Lindsey Graham said about the Supreme Court justice nominations, use my words against me.
Biden. He did way better than Biden in that debate.
Yeah, right? He did. I mean, he was fantastic, but to his credit, anyway. No, we won't get into that. He brought his own plexiglass and all that. But
smart. That guy's a player.
Guy's a player. Because that's what everybody remembers. The guy brought his plexiglass. People are concerned about COVID, and he played to that. And he is tied with Lindsey Graham. Lindsey Graham's been going on Fox News begging for money and all this stuff. This is COVID is just not something. I'm confident about this. COVID is not, if that stays in the headlines, a topic, especially when it's coupled with hypocrisy, especially when it's coupled by the sense of karma, right? It's just not the kind of topic. I don't see it in any way helping Trump, no matter how it spins it. That's where I fundamentally disagree with you. I mean, we have this question here from Osama. He's, hey, Osama, how's it going? I'm sorry, Osama, you have that name. I say it and everybody freaks out, but I'm sure you're used to it. But he's saying, what do you think was the rationale behind counseling Biden to stay calm during the debate? If anything, swing voters want to see a strong leader who doesn't get pushed around easily.
Thank you.
There you go.
Osama bin right.
Oh, okay.
I agree, buddy.
Oh, good. Sorry, Thomas. Yeah, so that is
Yeah, I
going to
think
make
Biden sucked. I thought he was terrible. There
okay.
were many missed opportunities. If we go back to the debate, we can deconstruct that.
Sure.
Trump missed opportunities too, but Trump's an easy target. To your points, Ali, and to Osama's point, where was this guy? I didn't get this. I didn't get the decisive reactions. I didn't get the counter punch.
I
And
agree with your 13-year-old.
yeah.
I don't want to say his name because I know it's a public live stream. I agree with my 14-year-old niece, and I agree with my Bob, and most of the people who've been polled after this. That I don't agree that Biden didn't play off well. Look, Osama, there are two things going on over here. Right? These are the two brands, and we talked about this, Spitz. Okay, we've got Trump as a strong, dominating, like fuck you guy,
Totally, and he did
that.
it.
He did it.
Mission accomplished.
And then you have Biden, right? And Biden is hold on. Biden is Uncle Joe. Okay,
Right.
we talked about that.
We talked about Thanos from the Avengers versus Uncle Ben, Uncle Joe.
Yeah.
Right? Empathy, power, destroy the world versus empathy and humanity.
Caring.
Right.
The guy who has been through loss, who understands, he's lost 3 family members.
Right.
He's been through, and he's been able to get up and go running. And he's the guy who says, "Hey, listen, have you been through loss? Let me hold your hand. I'll help you come back up. We can do it together. We can beat this." And he's that kind of guy, right? Beating obstacles and coming out stronger. So that's Biden, the empathy thing. What's happening right now? What's the biggest concern that everybody has in the U.S. by far? It's the pandemic.
And guess who just got it? Guess who just got the pandemic? They just got the bug.
I know. But just hear me out, right?
I'm with you.
Okay, we've got job losses. We've got small businesses closing down. We've got people who are scared that they're going to be evicted. We've got 200,000 people who've died in the U.S., right? 210,000 now almost.
And counting.
Right. What are they looking for? Are they looking for the guy who the last 8 months has been like, okay, we got to open the economy, while people keep dying and being strong and, let's beat this thing, with our fists? Or do you want the guy who's like, oh my God, I know you guys are losing a lot. I've been through loss. I'm going to help you through this. So there is an argument, a plausible argument to be made for both. But I think right now, okay, and pretty much all of the metrics are showing us that the empathy message is working. All of the polls after the debates, as you said, Spitz, right, are favoring the Biden in terms of
it's a long way to go, buddy. We got 30 days.
Have that. That I agree with you on. That I agree with you on.
And also to the point, I apologize for interrupting Trump style, but Trump.
Oh, we're both doing that. Yeah.
But Trump is now a COVID patient.
He is. Yeah.
And he's milking this already, even though he's jacked up on steroids and experimental treatments, and they're wheeling him around and they're pumping him with oxygen.
I don't see that though.
You don't see it, but he's doing two things right now.
Okay.
I got COVID, and I can go on a motorcade, and I could record videos. And look at me. I got COVID, but I'm in control of the government.
Yeah.
The nuclear button is 100 feet away in a football, kill 10 million people, 50 million people, 100 million people. Me, I got it. I'm in control. Don't worry about a thing. That's obvious from my video, right? And my motorcade. So strength, right? I'm in control. I'm powerful. I'm that powerful leader you saw at the debate stage owning that libtard.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where I think he's gonna work this a little bit. I got it. I know what this shit's like. I feel for you. And when people are reacting the way you think, which they are, with outrage as to his hypocrisy and irresponsibility and public health ignorance, now there's a new emotional component. Wow, this guy almost died. He almost died, but he's still swinging it and he's still running the country. And maybe I trust him. maybe he's okay. Maybe all that bad shit that he did or said, now I feel for him. And I'm curious what he says now. What's he going to do now? How's he going to help now? I'm not saying any of this is rational, and I think it's idiotic.
Well, yeah,
but I'm getting to the sensibility of what's driving this. And to your point, 63 million people voted for him, and I can't even believe that people are even on the fence at this point, but they are. And I can't even believe that 40% plus of the American electorate still support this maniac, but they do. And that's the essence of my point, which is, as liberals in our bubble, we often miss this stuff. And we ask ourselves, how can people support this guy? How can people believe in him? Even if you agree with a lot of his policies, just by any stretch of the imagination, he's unfit for the presidency that he has debauched. But no, signs and support and ambivalence. I still don't know. I'm undecided at this point. Well, if we're amazed by that, then there must be something going on that we're not sensitive to, and that's what I'm trying to tap into here, which is, why is he doing what he's doing? And it looks like a lot of this is backfiring, but I have this gut feeling that a lot of it isn't. And that's what's truly frightening, is that he's mirroring the tendency of a lot of autocrats who've come before him. And I'm afraid it's going to have the same result.
I think that so there's one thing that you're saying, from what you're talking about, there's one thing I'm getting that may speak to your point a little bit, or may support your point. And that is that the empathy thing that Biden had, that, I've been through loss, I've been through all this stuff, and now I can relate to you. Getting COVID has given Trump an opportunity to take some of that brand. Like, okay,
a lot of it.
Yeah, he's been through the loss. He's done all this stuff. And hey, you know what? Now I've been through fucking COVID. I have gotten COVID. I've been through what you guys are all fearing and what you guys have been dealing with. And now I know I can empathize with you.
The Republican convention, the Democrats did this whole thing about diversity and boosting up Uncle Joe as this empathetic kind of leader. And then what did the Republicans do? They brought this long string of mostly minority testimonials of people who knew him personally and who benefited from his administration. And they showcased that in front of the American people as a way of taking away Uncle Joe's empathy and smearing it on Trump. Yes, this guy's an asshole, but he's strong. But guess what? You get your strength and your empathy because deep down inside, he's a really good guy. But he's strong, so he can protect you and you feel safe. And at the same time, you can feel assured that he's not as big as an asshole as you thought. And if nothing else, he's an asshole to the people you hate, which is what you want anyway. And he's actually way nicer to you than you thought before, which is what we're talking about. This COVID thing adds to this having your assholism and your empathy too factor that Trump is trying to balance, or at least his team is trying to balance. And by getting COVID, you're going to see in the next, until the election, he's going to milk this in that empathy factor kind of way. And he can turn around this notion of being the insensitive public health catastrophe that he has been into the COVID patient who's endured, who's suffered, who's conquered, and has managed to stay strong throughout as a symbol of the United States overcoming this China plague. I'm not saying it's right, but I anticipate that that's where it's going to go. And Michael Moore is taking it even further, right? Michael Moore's ramblings.
I do think he's going to do that, and it should be scary to people that he is going to come out of this. If he survives this, then he's got the majority of the chances he's going to survive it. And he's got good health care.
He's probably going to make it, unless he has a fucking heart attack with, to your point, all the shit that he's making them pump him with.
Yeah.
So if his heart holds out, and his head doesn't fucking explode, he'll probably make it. And like I said, and he'll make it, and he'll keep control throughout. He won't, give the reins to Pence. And he'll do whatever he can to use this to turn it around in his favor.
So he comes out of this. So he survives it, which is the most likely scenario. He survived it after getting all these like really hard treatments. And then he, deepest, I went there, I was hospitalized, my oxygen was dropping, but I did this shit. I took these experimental treatments. We've got the best scientists in the world, America #1. I survived this. I came out of this, and you know what? Now I know. Now I know what you've been going through, and I'm gonna. And then I just have to stretch this shit out over 3 weeks. 3 weeks. I just have to
That's
talk about.
it. That's it. Remember when Hugo Chavez got kidnapped?
That's scary, Spitz.
Remember when Hugo Chavez from Venezuela got kidnapped? They had a coup d'etat. They kidnapped that mofo, and instead of killing him, they ended up giving him back up, and then he, reclaimed power. And then he gave these like 6-hour-long speeches where he talked about getting kidnapped, being in his cell, pacing back and forth, and thinking about the heart and soul of the Venezuelan people. And he knew that he would survive, and he would escape, and he would come back because he had a promise that he had to keep for the heart and soul of Venezuela. Remember that shit?
Yeah.
I'm just using this as an example of the Trump COVID story. So instead of talking about the pandemic that he fucked up, he's going to be talking about the pandemic that he himself had to endure, that because of his own wherewithal, he conquered, and at the same time highlighting the miraculous treatments that let the President of the United States walk right out of Walter Reed and lead the country into victory. That's the bullshit that we're going to hear for the next month.
And it's going to be, okay, so I see it. I get
that's what we're talking about, Ali, which is like, does it make sense? No.
No, of course it's wrong.
The animated movie Minions made $1 billion.
Hey, listen,
did that make sense? No.
If you could reason with Trump supporters, there would be no Trump supporters, right? No, I mean the thing is, so I see when I was growing up, right, overseas in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, my parents used to subscribe to Reader's Digest, and they always had this sort of like fiction story at the end. And I used to think about this, like every one of these stories that these Americans love, and I'm sitting across the Atlantic reading this shit, right? Like every story they love is like, there's somebody who's downtrodden, who's struggling through things.
It's a hero story. Yeah.
Yeah, you lose it. These obstacles come up, they're cornered, you don't know how they're going to get out of it, and somehow they get out to survive, and they're stronger than ever. And Biden had that story. Biden had that story with the loss of his wife and kid in a car crash, with the loss of his son.
Empathy. Human.
I know how to do it.
I knew it. I've been through it.
Coming out on top, becoming vice president, becoming a presidential candidate, doing all that despite all the shit that he's been through. So he had that story. But now that Trump has COVID, whether he has that story or not, I don't know. But he definitely has a one of those Reader's Digest stories that Americans love so much.
All the mofo wants to do is talk about himself. That's all he does. And in this case, it could actually work in his empathy favor, because everyone knows someone who had COVID. Many of us know people who died from COVID, and all of us are deeply impacted of it. Ironically, because of fucking Donald J. Trump, because he fucked this up. But that's cognitive, that's rational, and it's complex. But now he's a patient. He's endured, but he's been stoical, and he relied on the miracle cures that him and his administration and the Corona Task Force has created for the benefit of the American people. And he's the living embodiment of the success and the eventual conquest of the China plague.
Okay.
Blah, 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 blah.
We got the story. But now there are some other factors, okay?
Right.
So unprecedented levels. I mean, this has not happened really before to this extent. Over 90% of people, and I know that, these things are decided on small margins. Over 90% of people have already decided who they're going to vote for, and they are very enthusiastic about it. And it's not enthusiasm for Biden or for, but there's enthusiasm for Trump, and there's enthusiasm against Trump. And over 90% of people have decided either hate his guts and they're going to vote for a toddler's soiled diaper over him.
Yeah, or you or me. They can
Yeah, anyway,
write us in.
and the ones who are going to vote for him,
Mike Tyson needs to run for president, I think.
well, anybody can run for president this time right now. And then it's and then on the other hand, like people who absolutely love Trump, he said I can shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue. Well, he killed,
and he's already killed 200,000 people, so that's true.
And they're still sticking with him. So there's, and like you said, his 42%, his base, right? His floor is it's pretty solid, but the question is his ceiling really solid? Right now, it seems like it is. But if this story comes out, do you think it's still going to move the needle? Because think about it from your point of view, right? As someone who sees all of this stuff, you're not falling for it. What makes you think that other people that who are independents or who are sort of like undecided are falling for it? I'll tell you something. In my extended family, there's a bunch of people voting for Trump, and a lot of my extended family lives in the U.S. And I'm Pakistani. They're Muslim.
And how are they feeling now? Did they flip?
They were decided, like the ones who want, nobody's flipped. So the ones who wanted to vote for Trump are already voting for Trump. They like his policies. I don't like what he says, but I like his policies. There are people say, and we have these sort of vibrant conversations. I mean, Trump has this base. It's basically, you have evangelicals, you've got people who are generally well off, and my family kind of falls into that territory, as in they're kind of well-to-do, my extended family. And then the third thing is these non-college educated, mainly white.
Yeah, and then how does the demographic break out in the swing states that are critical, right? The Michigans, the Pennsylvanias, the Ohios, the Wisconsins, right? That's the key thing, and you could analyze the shit out of this, get Nate in your headset, and tell you how it breaks down.
The pro-Trump people in my family happen to be in blue states, which is great. I do have a sibling who lives in Texas, and I have a sibling who lives in Arizona. Both of them are swing states this year, but they're going for Biden. But they don't love Biden. They don't love him, right?
He's a snoozer. He's a snoozer. In ways, there's a benefit to that, along the lines of what we were talking about before. But
they're voting for no matter what. Like
I get it. The bigger question, though, is you're breaking it down into these segments, like the evangelicals, right? The lesser educated, white people, etc. Right?
Yeah, rich people.
Okay, I got that. But there was a wonderful analysis that came out after the election where they tried to analyze the salient behavioral characteristic from kind of a psychometric profiling point of view as to what are the handful, and ideally what's the singular or secondary characteristic that somebody displays in terms of supporting a guy like Trump. Mm-hmm. And the answer that popped up consistently was that these individuals are almost magnetically and instinctively drawn toward an authoritarian sensibility.
Right. Yes.
And what that constitutes, essentially, not even talking about the candidate or the authoritarian figure, is a feeling of insecurity and disruption, which is assuaged by supporting an individual who represents strength, decisiveness, and the execution of all this energy. And Trump is that guy, and he continues to be that guy. So those people who like Trump, and even the undecideds who are teeter-tottering, this draw to an authoritarian sensibility might be a deciding factor. And that's kind of what I'm getting at, which is Uncle Joe is loaded with empathy, humanity. It's the guy's whole story. He's a nice guy. But if you've got the threat of nuclear war, if you have even lesser threats of globalization that's taking away your jobs, if you're terrified of this immigrant situation, whether it's directly impactful on your life or not, if you feel you've been dealt the wrong hand for the last 10 years, 20 years, and you're really mad and you're really upset and you're really scared and the future is really uncertain, would you be drawn to an individual with whom you feel this emotional, nice guy empathy? Or are you more instinctively drawn to this bust out, uncouth, rude asshole whom you know, despite the fact that he's coming at you in this wrong way and he gives you a bad taste in the mouth? Do you nonetheless feel that he's in a better position to protect you and your family from these horrible forces, whether they're seen or unseen? That's the emotional trigger. And again, regardless of what you say about Trump, his strategy, his impulsiveness, his narcissism, the list is long, he does embody these characteristics in a way we've never, ever seen before. Every time you hear the word unprecedented when you're listening to a podcast or watching the news, you have to do a shot. and I'm going to say it again, it's unprecedented.
Or a new low.
So everyone do a shot. Unprecedented. Trump is, by any stretch of the imagination, unprecedented. And with this comes an incredible advantage for triggering people in both extremes. And now the polls are in the toilet. And even Chris Christie said this guy flew in too hot at the debates. And he's precipitated this public health crisis. We got 4% of the population of the world and 25% of the deaths. Any stretch of the imagination, this guy is fucking it up. But emotionally, he still is keeping to his brand of being this authoritarian, tell it like it is, no nonsense business guy who's he might not help you, but he's certainly going to kick the ass of those people you already hate. And this country is so full of hate and polarization that he's the reliable guy to get at least that job done. And that, as the libtard on your show here, is my biggest fear, is that when we erase all the polls and we jump out of our libtard bubble and we really try to understand the rationale of tens of millions of Americans who actually elected this guy, continue to support this guy, and the many, many, many hundreds of thousands of people who are still undecided, many of them in critical swing state areas, this is the question to ultimately ask, which is this authoritarian bully, this guy who's shit all over the American presidency, are people still willing to take him, accept him, and ride with him for another 4 years, despite all of this stuff? Or will they come to their senses and realize that a more humane, rational establishment candidate can set the nation back on path, calm everybody down, just chill out, Uncle Joe's here, and then we're going to move forward and recalibrate the country so the public health crisis will go away, the economy will stabilize, and we'll be more diverse and more accepting of each other as human beings? That's the key question. Is fear top of mind? Fear leads to authoritarianism and control. And sympathy, empathy, more reasonableness leads to a moderate establishment candidate who more or less gets the nation back on track, even if on track wasn't perfect. And that's the ultimate thing that's up for grabs right now. And I fear that it's teeter-tottering way more than most liberals assume. Yeah. And Biden does not have this in the bag at all. Okay, and 30 days is an eternity. That's my essential kind of top line view of what you're saying.
That's persuasive. Susanna's saying this perfectly fits into cult psychology. She's also 100%. Saying, 100%. Yeah, she's also saying that you're trying to send me to the hospital with that drinking game. So, which was, so here,
well, Susanna's absolutely right. It is a cult personality, but see, that's the scary part of this, Suzanne, is that all the underpinnings of what motivates people to join a cult, a feeling of belonging and the fear of the destabilization and the unknown, and to participate actively in a cult, part of a tribe, part of a group, and all the positive reinforcement and identity that gets, and the inherent polarization that espouses in terms of creating an us and them wall between people in the cult and people out of the cult. And let me just add one thing. The entire principle of American exceptionalism going back generations is a cult mentality. It's the cult of the United States. We've conquered in Europe. We've conquered in Asia. We're the technological marvel of the world. We're the economic powerhouse that's become the policeman and watchdog of the entire earth. And it's really on us, right? All this stuff is on us. That's the cult of America. And it's ironic that a cult-like presidential figure like Donald Trump, in a sense, brings this entire American exceptionalist house of cards down. It's not America first. A lot of what he's doing is making us last in terms of respect, in terms of our capacity to work with our allies, and ultimately bring benefit, I think, to most Americans, especially in a humanistic and diverse kind of way. So again, a lot loaded with paradox and irony, but that's a great point. It's a cult. It's a cult within a cult. And who's going to survive this? Hopefully the US will. This is terrible. As an American, I'm scared shitless. This is really bad that we're even having this conversation right now.
Yeah, it should be. So, so let's move on to, I think your position, and I kind of get this, is that despite everything that's happened, despite the polls, despite all of this stuff, there is an opportunity right now, and it's actually right for Trump, and he's usually very good exploiting these opportunities to take the empathy card, right? Again, that Biden had the empathy card, that I've overcome obstacles and I've come through, and now that he's got COVID and he survives it, I got the disease, the obstacle, now I know what you've been through, and he can milk it he just has to do it for the next 3 weeks, and he can cruise to victory. And
maybe.
No, it may be, yeah. But it's a significant enough risk that it's very plausible. It's plausible. Right?
In a sense, it's ironic. It's a gift that he got COVID. Yeah. A lot of the pundits are saying that this is the worst thing that could possibly happen. It puts everyday conversation around the virus. And Trump's been doing everything possible to shift the conversation away from the pandemic. And now, ironically, and this is what's amazing, and this is completely the Trump style, you take your biggest weakness and you flip it into a catapult of an advantage.
A hero story.
A hero story. So I haven't been able to talk about what's obvious to the elephant in the room is me fucking up this pandemic. He knows it. Everyone knows it. But you know what? I just got blasted with it. And now I'm a patient. And now I'm going to tell you my story. And then, you're going to feel so good that the president of the United States can feel what you feel.
Yeah. So he can definitely milk that. Now, here's a question. Let's go on to the next thing. This is something we have to talk about this. Mars is here. Hey, Mars, how's it going? Mars is saying, sorry if this has already been addressed, and it hasn't, but it was going to be. I'm glad that you asked the question. Biden has a lead. He's got a pretty significant lead, very significant. But are the polls even reliable? So I know that we're going to disagree on this. Spitz, you go first. You talk about it, and then I have a lot to say about the polls. So
all right. And again, first off, I just want to say the polls are meaningful. They're the barometric pressure, albeit your little gizmo is a little wonky, of the pulse of what Americans are thinking and feeling and might eventually do. So I'm not disregarding polls. I think they're significant. Nate Silver has some good points of view on why they're significant, exactly along the lines of this discussion. So polls are valuable. However, and this is a huge however, based upon 2016 and other factors, I bring up the shot drinking word again, unprecedented. The fact that all these factors are as unprecedented as they are, the nature of Trump's candidacy was unprecedented, and now the nature of his presidency is absolutely off the charts unprecedented. We've never seen anything like this before. Everything's been dialed up to 11, and everyone's going nuts. So given these factors, relying on people giving calls, surveys, trying to elicit response from tens of millions of Americans in terms of how they feel about this situation and ultimately what they're going to do about it is questionable. And I think, this is just me, N of one, bald guy with a microphone in New York, I have a feeling that analogous to 2016, a lot of these results are unreliable because a lot of folks who are effervescently excited about Trump fall underneath the radar of these polling channels. They don't get their polling vote, if you will, counted at this point. And many individuals, and again, this is speculative, I'm just going with what I feel, when they do get that phone call or are filling out that survey, are not being genuine about their feelings and thoughts. For some reason, they're holding back, whether they want to stick it to the libs, whether they're ashamed of supporting this maniac, or for whatever reason, maybe similar to what was in 2016. To your exact point, Mars, I think they're off. To Ali's point, Biden has such a considerable lead, though, that even given these fudge factors, it does seem that Trump is fucked. It seems that way at this point. And to that, let's assume he is. Let's assume the polls are more or less, given a few basis points, fairly accurate. 30 days is a long time. And lastly, everything that we've been talking about over the last hour or so reinforces my own fear as someone who hopes Biden wins, that Trump's standing is going to be very much improved by the time most people make that decision. Once again, analogous to 2016. We can have a few more October surprises. There could be more rioting and protests and even vandalism in the streets across America. One more incident of the police shooting an unarmed black guy or woman, regardless of circumstance, could be a trigger point. Law and order. Now, COVID patient. It goes on and on in terms of the dangers that the country faces in terms of getting this maniac out of office. I'm not a Trump supporter, but I do respect what he's doing. I understand, I think, why he's doing it. And I'm way more terrified than most, I think, in terms of his capacity to actually pull this off just based on what I'm seeing.
Yeah. Okay, so I have I hear you on the poll. There's this one concern that I have when we talk about this stuff, and this is like I think that the polls are the only reliable thing. At this point, the one point I'll give you is the point that you said about the unprecedented thing. You know, that we say unprecedented. It is. Yeah, I know. Hey, take a shot, Susanna.
Take a shot. I dare you. I hear it. I hear it 10 times a day.
I know.
Sometimes
I know. But if we go by precedent, okay, if we go by precedent, right, which I know a lot of things are unprecedented. Generally, this far out, when you're less than 4 weeks or about 30 days from the election, then usually the way that the polls have been seen at this point is how the election turns out. They correlate pretty closely. Okay, there are now here's where the precedent part comes in. We talk about the 2016 polls, right? In 2016, the polls were actually just as accurate as they have been since around 1972. Now, I know that sounds crazy, but Hillary went in last poll, I think, with a real clear politics. No, Nate Silver's 538 had her leading by around 3-point-something%. She won the popular vote by 2-point-something%. So it wasn't actually off. Like those polls, the national polls were accurate. But when it came to the battleground states, the polls, again, largely accurate. They were inaccurate. They were off by a couple of percent in Michigan and Wisconsin, right? And it just so happened that Trump's very narrow margin of victory lined up with that narrow error that was there. But that error actually wasn't much different from a poll before 1972. So the polls did work. There are a couple of things that they corrected for since 2016. And that is, the college, non-college demographic, because they found out that one of the reasons, one of the most consistent factors in Trump's victory in 2016 was level of education, right? The uneducated people generally voted for Trump a lot more. Educated people voted for him a lot less. So I don't, and pretty much if you look at, I think Nate Silver also posted the polls going in from 1972 to now. right? In all of the last 10 or 15 elections, so I don't know how many they've been, but essentially the polls have been predictive consistently of who's going to win 35 days out. I think he did this like 5-6 days ago. So 35 days out, they have been consistent. They've predicted who won the popular vote, right? The national polls. And in most cases, aside from Gore and aside from Hillary Clinton in 2016, they predicted who ended up being president. So they have been consistent. So when we keep on talking about 2016, we are looking at a sample size of 1. Now, granted, that sample size of 1 was so dramatic and it was so devastating.
It was unprecedented.
Unprecedented. It just completely infused liberals who most of them didn't even show up to vote, right? Because they were so confident that Hillary Clinton was going to win and she's a shoo-in, and they didn't really like her much anyway. So they stayed home, and they were so confident that they got infused them with such PTSD that it's just a really, really tough thing for them to even hold up any hope whatsoever that this could happen, because it makes them feel like they're going to be complacent again and the same thing is going to happen all over again. So there's that fact playing into it. Another thing about polls is that, we look at polls as just being predictive of the election result. Even now, to your point, Trump just got COVID. You don't know how it's going to handle it. You don't know how the GOP is going to spin this. You've got the confirmation of Amy Coney Barrett showing up, coming up soon. That's imminent. You don't know how that's going to play. There's a lot of things that are going to happen in the next 30 days, right? And so we don't know. Even at this point, polls are probably not predictive of the election result. But what they are is they are cross-sectional trackers of the voters' preferences at a certain time. So we're talking about strategy. How is our strategy working? We get, we do analytics. We try to figure out what the feedback is. We do that in it's all data driven. We get that data, and we get a good idea of how people are thinking at a given moment. Okay, so we know how they're thinking at this moment. Now, one of those things that we're hearing is that over 90% of people have their minds made up in an unprecedented way. That has that large number. Yeah, I know. Another Clorox shot. Everybody drink some bleach. And that is also something, that level, people are so polarized, but they're so dead set on who they're going to vote that, that's also something that hasn't really happened before. Now, for instance, and this isn't a great example of the strategy. You talked about the shooting of the unarmed black man or woman. It turns out, Trump tried that strategy, right? For the longest time, he was like law and order, violence. He went to visit Kenosha. He went to visit Wisconsin.
I thought it was effective.
You thought it was effective.
I did, along the lines of this authoritarian brand that he's got.
I'm sure.
Law and order, kick ass and take names kind of thing.
They agreed with you. But what happened after that was in Wisconsin, right? Poll after poll showed Biden's lead widening. It did not work. It didn't work for them immediately. So in that case, right, a poll is telling. So if you try out a certain strategy and then you get results afterwards, like this is not something that we're thinking in the future what's going to happen. This is something, you have an incident that happens and you get polling results afterwards on how people are looking at it. Different agencies, including conservative favoring polls like Rasmussen and Trafalgar, these results come in, and it turns out that this strategy is not really playing well with people. It's not playing well in Oregon, obviously. It's not playing well in Wisconsin. It's not playing well in Minnesota. Minnesota has pretty much for the Democrats hugely, and that's where George Floyd was killed. So this whole thing about the law and order, the violence, and the looting, it's just not something that's playing. And then, the Trump campaign, to its credit, saw that, and they have started to look for other angles to go about it, right? Because they know that this is not the kind of thing they're going to try.
The only reason I think they've stopped it is because some of the unrest is quelled a little bit.
Right.
Okay, so it's I think Portland's calmed down a little bit. I know Chicago has calmed down a little bit. Chicago flared several times.
Yeah.
So I think that their reaction isn't so much responding to polls, because I would bet that Republican strategists have the same degree of skepticism about the polls that I do. There's this WMD in Iraq mentality that's there. which underpins the essence of the Trump administration. This is why Trump has COVID now. What was interesting to me is that not only is he in denial about something as simple as ubiquitous mask wearing and building testing capability and the like, and getting PPE everywhere, what have you. He's personally saying "fuck you" to the virus.
Mm-hmm.
His crass disregard for some of the basics here isn't just political strategy. It's basically he's saying, "I'm the boss. You're not going to tell me what to do." And I think that mentality of not being able or willing to be told what to do is pervasive throughout the Republican establishment. They're in power. They want to keep in power. And I think their attitude toward the polls, contrary to what you hear on Morning Joe, is that they don't give a shit. They're just driving this shit home with the feeling that this guy on brand won 2016. And if we just set him loose, he's going to win in 2020, at least we hope. And we're not going to be reactive to polling that we hear here and there, because we're essentially, he's not going to even let us change the strategy. It's a one-man band.
No,
I don't think so.
I don't know that that's true, Spitz. Like,
that's why we're having this conversation. I think some of the more conventional strategists think this way. But so I think if you listen to Stephen Miller, he doesn't think this way.
Well,
Bill Barr, Stephen Miller.
Well, those guys aren't. I mean, they're not really. Let's look at the strategist. The guy who was heading his campaign before was Brad Parscale, right? So Brad Parscale.
Yeah, he just had a nervous breakdown and got assaulted by cops after beating up his wife and trying to kill himself. So he's not the best.
Something happens.
Not the best guy to cite.
They either end up in jail or something. Well, you know what happens. I mean, he was just the next in line. It's not even surprising anymore. I mean, it's not.
No, it's par for the course. But
I think that he was going with the strategy. He was going with remember the whole Obamagate thing. And he's like, "Oh yeah, we're really gonna unleash our arsenal soon, and just wait." And then this Obamagate thing happened, and people yapped about it on Fox News for a little bit, and then it died out. And it turns out nobody really cares because there's a fucking pandemic, and there are.
Then he moved on. See, nothing lasts long. Trump's ADHD is worse than mine.
I know.
The dude could focus for like 10 minutes, and then he's done. His brain short circuits. He's got, he's like the pig in Toy Story, changing channels every fucking 2 seconds. Ding, 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 ding. He's going through. His policy is like that. His PR is like that. But he is solid when it comes to the same attitude, though.
His thing, the strategy. But now they've got Bill Stepien, or Stephen, I don't know how to pronounce his name, but this new guy who's running his campaign, who now also has COVID, by the way.
Of course he does.
Of course he does. And like the head of the RNC and like Kellyanne Conway and Jesus Christ. Anyway, so now this guy, right? He is looking at the polls. They are looking at the polls. They're actually looking at what's working and what's not. Now, granted, they don't have much control over what Trump does. They'll dress him up and put on his socks and send him out of the house and go debate Biden. And here's what we want you to do. And he goes out and he just
he didn't do anything. There were a million missed opportunities for Trump too. A lot of his I was reading that his own people were like, dude, we had people planted in the audience for you. Right?
Yeah,
he's like
I think but they do have internal polling. I mean, they have actually say what you want about Kellyanne Conway, but I mean, she has a record of being an absolutely incredible pollster. I mean, it's one of the reasons that she got.
She's not the facade that she.
No, she's not. Right, I mean, obviously, she's supposed to be a lackey on TV, but I mean, it does. She's
She's married to George. Her daughter just went ballistic.
Her daughter exposed her diagnosis, right? I mean,
and their daughter was going on and on about the president and COVID. They pulled that tweet. It was actually on TikTok. They pulled that.
It was on TikTok. Yeah.
You can imagine. Think about Thanksgiving at the Conway household. There should be a sitcom.
I like it. I actually have respect for that family. I do. I have respect for that family because it does remind me of my family in the sense that, not in the sense that we're all in politics and everybody's public, but we have
unbelievable. Yeah.
Completely, like I have my, people, in my family who are very sympathetic to Trump. I'm very, very anti-Trump. We have people, this is Canada, so, who vote conservative. Like my brother always votes conservative. He voted for Harper. He voted for, but, I don't. And we always have these spirited discussions, but we get along, our all the cousins play together. We have dinners every weekend. So I understand. I would be surprised if they have that much tension. I guess they probably do, because I mean, she just apparently infected the whole family with COVID.
Isn't shot? Merriam-Webster just published the lookups for Schadenfreude, right? This German term, which it's like shady kind of friendship, right? Which is it's this dark, cynical underpinning of humor.
Yeah.
And there were like 35,000% more lookups of that term in the last few days than before, right? So it's the irony, the hypocrisy is just great. But again, my warning to my fellow libtards is don't take it at face value. The magician here is going to turn this shit around, like we're saying. We're on, like, don't look at the polls and think, okay. Yeah. That's my point. Lastly, about the polls, Ali. Like, what do you do with them? So you got a maniac, at least on the Republican side, you got a maniac who doesn't listen to anything anyway. And on the Democratic side, I was just reading that the Biden strategy moving forward is pretty much to do nothing different. Keep Joe isolated, keep him in precision outreach and precision areas, and just be cool. Don't make any mistakes. And it's essentially, this is what freaks me out, Ali. This is why we're having this conversation. It's analogous to what Hillary was advised and what she was doing at around the same time too, which is just chill out, don't make mistakes, duck and cover this email shit. You got it in the bag. At this point in 2016, Hillary was already like talking to cabinet members and like getting herself excited and just rolling out the red carpet for herself. And this is what deeply concerns me.
But because that's not happening with Byron Spitz. That's not happening. I
know, but like I said, I was just reading that the Biden campaign is just all full steam ahead, which is just keep chilling, don't make mistakes. We got this. It concerns me a little bit, because Trump's got some more stuff up his sleeve. And I'm really fearful that the polls could be much more deceptive than they actually are. And the last point I just want to add to yours is that it's a point I made in a couple live streams ago with you before, which is, even if Biden, according to the polls, has a 60 or even a 70% chance of actually winning, that doesn't mean he will.
Of course. That's what 60-70% chance means, that there is another 30 to 40%.
But that's my damn point. Well, let's say you're right. All the polls are spot on, and then we got 70% chance Joe Biden is going to be president number 46. Right on. If you're in Vegas and you're spinning the wheel, or you got a good hand, 30%.
Is a lot.
It's a lot. That's my point.
If you have a diagnosis.
So what does this shit mean?
This is more about that you get a diagnosis that you have a 30% chance of dying.
Right. Right. Trump has a 5% chance of dropping dead from COVID.
Yeah.
He could die, man.
I don't. So, by the way, I don't want him to. I know a lot of people are saying.
I don't want him to either. I want him to lose. I just for the record, I want Trump to lose, and then get indicted, and then run off to hang out with Edward Snowden in Russia. That's what I want. But I actually for it. I'm asking for the universe for Trump to lose, and then to get indicted, and then to extradite himself to Russia.
I'm not even concerned about that. I don't want him to. I would be disappointed, and I would be really, really frustrated if he died of COVID. I would not like it. I don't want it to happen. You know why? Because he's going to die of COVID, and then his supporters will say, well, he would have won if he didn't die. It's just the only reason he didn't win is because he died. And I don't want that.
This is his comment here, which is he's firing COVID, right?
Firing COVID.
You need to work for the Trumpers. This is great. Yeah.
Susanna, future strategist for the Trumpers is great.
Yeah, that's great.
No, but that's the thing. I don't want COVID to defeat him. I want the voters to defeat him.
I agree categorically, and that's why we're having this.
Yeah.
But again, I'm scared shitless because I see what this guy's doing. I learned my lessons from 2016 when I thought Hillary, despite all the problems, is just duh. I had my niece ask me what did I think Hillary's chances were, and I was like, oh, she's got it in the bag, like 100.
Yeah, that's what people thought, and that's not the case right now. So I think one thing is that, remember, again, I gotta say this again. I mean, Trump, the votes that he got, the number of votes he got in 2016 were less than what Michael Dukakis got in 1988. They were less than what Mitt Romney got in 2012. And so the liberals were very complacent. The big difference between then and now,
I get it.
And remember, 80,000 vote margin in just a Rust Belt. The big difference right now is that they're very, very animated. They have a fire
but
under
I think
that.
the Republicans are animated too. The Republicans love this guy.
They do.
The hatred that liberals feel toward Trump in every way, the racism, the misogyny, the xenophobia, etc., etc.
The Republicans.
This guy makes me sick.
I gotta say something though.
Conversely, let me just finish this one statement.
Yeah.
The Republicans who support him, and even some people a little bit on the edge, love this guy. They've been waiting for a Trump their entire lives. That explains the effervescent enthusiasm since the primaries for this guy. They adore him. And it goes back to the statement made earlier about being a cult-like figure. He can do no wrong. They adore the man.
Yeah.
And but so again, you're saying a lot of the liberals are out. They're like, they're all energized, but the Trump base is going nuclear.
There is a fact here, though. And the fact is that there are many more liberals in the U.S. than there are Republicans.
What about where it counts?
No, I know that's what we're getting into. Like where it counts.
Where it counts.
Where we're in the battleground states, right?
Yeah.
There are, that's where it really comes down to. So they have to rely.
That's the problem. We wouldn't even be having this conversation if the Electoral College didn't exist.
I'm actually adding to your point here.
Yeah.
Right, is that generally Republicans are a minority in the United States. They are a minority, which is why they have to rely on things like the Electoral College, which favors minorities, a handful of battleground states rather than the popular vote, which is why they have to rely on, the transforming the judiciary, right? You have had the last 8 elections in the U.S., 7 out of the 8, okay, the people, I think, what was it? I can't remember the exact thing, but I think the popular vote, the Republicans have lost the popular vote in 7 out of 8 of the last elections. 7 out of 8. The only one they won was 2004, which is George Bush Jr. when he was reelected. Okay, they have been a minority ever since. So they have relied on the Electoral College. When it comes to the Supreme Court, 5 out of the 9 justices that are sitting on the Supreme Court right now, majority of them, have been appointed by presidents who lost the popular vote. Who lost it. So you have unelected Supreme Court judges who are the be-all and end-all of pretty much everything happens.
And the Republicans get this better than the Democrats.
That's why they do it. That's why if you go to
winning is winning. You just win. Fuck it. You're Mitch McConnell. Mitch McConnell was interviewed by the New York Times. He came across as kind of he's a good old boy. He just said, if you don't win, what difference does anything make?
He is the most successful Republican leader probably in recent history, Mitch McConnell, because he has like 280 judges, conservative judges.
He's a pragmatist. He's an asshole, but he's a pragmatist. He doesn't care.
He just wants the judges.
He's not in jail. He didn't break any laws. It was all, a lot of it's convention and etiquette. He says, fuck that, set etiquette on fire. We won, and we're going to populate the judiciary with our boys and girls, and that's how it's going to be. Yeah. And that's unfortunately how it is, because Hillary's emails, we don't really like her. My dickhead progressive friends who, because their health insurance is expensive, they're not going to vote for Biden.
We had on our other podcast,
job, liberals.
Yeah. We had on the other on Secular Jihadists, we had Andrew Seidel, who's a constitutional attorney. Yeah. And we were talking about them. He was saying that, this sort of divide between, like, the fact that more and more sort of anti-democratic things, like the Electoral College, like the Supreme Court judges being appointed by presidents who don't win the popular vote, like really important, the Senate. We talk about the Senate. 18% of the U.S. population elects 52 senators. So majority of senators.
Yeah, North Dakota has 2 senators in the Senate.
It's got like 10 people in the state.
And then the state of California,
which has more people.
They have 2 senators.
Yeah, California has more people.
North Dakota has as much power in the United States Senate as California does.
Yeah, and that's just for perspective, California has a higher population than all of Canada, right? And then you have
it's number 5 or 6 in GDP based on country rankings.
So the Senate is a fundamentally anti-democratic body.
But that explains this whole thing, Ali. That's what I'm getting at. Which is these Rust Belt states, right, with minority populations in the sense of power, right? Yeah. Maybe they like the authoritarian, and this authoritarian is going ape shit, hog wild, and that's getting them excited. I don't know any other way to look at it.
I mean, it's getting them excited because look. So let me just say this as a concluding statement. So Republicans are a minority in the United States. Okay, you have a president who has lost the popular vote by 3 million votes. Okay, he is appointed. He's going to now appoint his 3rd Supreme Court justice. Okay, who's going to confirm that Supreme Court justice? The Senate, which is fundamentally anti-democratic. And people say, well, the U.S. is not a democracy; it's a constitutional republic. It's not even. The Senate isn't even what you would see in a representative.
That's the point. The founding fathers did not trust the mob. They did not want Americans to have a say in their government in an absolute sense. They had to buttress the mob, which is the House of Congress, which is the Senate.
Right. But so this is the Senate, but this is kind of beyond that now. So it's beyond just not kowtowing to the mob. This is like 18% of people electing a majority of it. So it's a very different thing. And the moment when you have that, when you start going more and more into minority rule, that's when you start setting the stage for a majority rising up and the revolution. So when people have these concerns about potential violence,
I hope so.
So you are in favor of that. You think that is a method that, we know it works. We know it works, right? Like the violence thing and everything, but
that's a whole separate topic. But it's backfiring to a certain extent now. To your point, and Tifa is the biggest gift to Donald Trump. When should we have this revolution? Just chill out and wait until after November, and then you could start burning things down if you want. Just chill out, okay?
Yeah, chill out. So let's do this. We got about 20-ish minutes left, right? So I don't want this to go over 2 hours. So let's just take a couple of. There's some good questions here. Mars is asking about, and this is stuff that's on everybody's mind. So I'm selecting these. Mars is saying, isn't there an argument to be made that people aren't truly saying what they think? We watched the election on 5/38 back in 2016. Everyone was shocked, speechless at how off the prediction it was. And to add to that point, this is what I want to ask you about. Carol is saying, beware the secret Trump voters a la 2016. So
that was my point. These are my points earlier.
Yeah, so the secret Trump voters, are there a lot of them? Like, do you think this is a real thing?
Oh, yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Nate
yeah.
Silver made
Especially in the states that count.
so Nate Silver made an interesting point,
Yeah.
arguing for the opposite. And I'm not saying this is right or not, but
No, well, he's a smart guy. He's a, you
yeah,
know.
we're talking here about what's plausible, not necessarily
Right.
what's correct. So, but he made the point that I go out, I don't see a lot of Biden signs. You look at Biden rallies, 10 people show up, nobody cares. You know, I've seen Trump signs everywhere, Trump bumper stickers everywhere. I'm not seeing. So when you look at that, you don't see a lot of prominent Biden shit. But when you look at it, every single day that he's been in the race, Spitz, Biden has been leading. There hasn't been a single day when he hasn't been leading in the polls. And his battleground states, like, you know, he's got a significant lead. But you don't see the yard signs. You don't see the rally audiences. So could it be that there is a silent majority of potentially secret Biden voters? Well, probably not secret, but in terms of a silent majority. Not saying that's the case, right? Objectively, it does seem to be, because they don't seem to be very vocal and ostentatious about, you know, what they think. But it's plausible. It's plausible. Like, it feels a lot more plausible to me than these secret Trump voters, considering it. And again, this is not 2016. It's just not 2016. You know, it is. We have to be aware of 2016. We have to learn from it. We have to do that. But this is just not. It's a very, very different year. Dynamics very different. A lot of things you were saying, the fear of immigrants and all that. Like, this guy he's not an outsider coming in to disrupt the system.
But he's acting like an outsider, though, Ali. And this is another. This is a brilliant strategy on Trump's part. Again, I'm flattering this guy I hate, but when he starts saying that the rioting that you're happening in Portland and Chicago, all these incendiary Democrat cities, are what you would see under Biden, and they're all happening under Trump. he's
not running as an incumbent. He's not running as one.
No, but his strategy, exactly right. His strategy is running as the new guy.
Yeah, it is.
Right, and it's brilliant, because that takes all the heat off him, and it makes it exciting for his supporters and for people who could embrace all the bullshit.
Yeah. Susanna saying, again, man, I want to get a drink with Mookie. And absolutely, you should. I'm actually flying Mookie over to here as soon as the restrictions ease up in the spring. And I'm absolutely going to do it. And I'll tell you why later. I'm not going to get into that on the air, but, in any case, yeah, there's something happening. But she's asking another question, which, again, so here's the thing. And I want to add something to this, right? So
yeah, that's a great question.
What is your pitch to the undecided? And I want to add to that last time, Spitz, you came here, you talked about Uncle Joe. They did it. They did Uncle Joe. He was all over the convention. Uncle Joe was all over the debate.
He was not over the debate. Well,
no.
Yeah.
The empathy.
I got that aspect was there. Yeah.
Okay, so you said that they're trying it, but Uncle Joe is really, really easy to steamroll, right? When it comes to the debate. Yes.
Oh, that's my point. Yeah.
I think he won. I think most people think he won, but I'm asking you, as someone who has the opinion that you do, what do you advise the Biden people to do? Because if they're too aggressive and doesn't work, because you can't be out aggressive Trump, right? You can't out Trump. If they're not, right, then they are too passive, and they just risk getting bulldozed. So how do you strike that balance, and who can do it?
Sure. Let's tackle both. So let's ask Susanna's, like, what would be my pitch to the undecideds? And in a nutshell, I would say, Mr. or Ms. Undecided, is your life better or worse now than it was in 2016 before Donald J. Trump took office? All ideology and name calling aside, turn your gaze inward and ask yourself if the United States, if your life, if your job, if the health and wellness of your family is better or worse under Trump as president of the United States, or as they were under Obama. And answer that question honestly. And see what kind of result, and use various metrics in terms of work, in terms of your perception of America's standing, in terms of your vision ahead for the future, in terms of your relationship with your friends, with your family, your consumption of media, across every aspect of your life. Ask yourself that simple question. Write it down if you have, and make your decision based on whether you're better off or not. And
So
I think
Reagan,
that's a convincing kind of argument, because we're in the shitter, and you can blame the China plague all you want, but with that comes
Kung flu.
With that comes the second part of your question, Ollie, which is what I would advise
before
Biden.
Before you go on to the second part, I just wanted to interrupt and say one thing. There's Ronald Reagan asked this question. He's like, "Are you better off now than you were 4 years ago?"
And it was really excellent.
And I would also say, are you because a lot of this is about pride and patriotism. Are you prouder to be an American today than you were 4 years ago?
That's part of it, right?
Yeah, that's part of it, right?
Right. Which is what I meant implicitly by the perception of America at home and abroad, and how you feel about being an American and our place in the world.
Yeah,
before and after. And then, let's compare. And then the second part of it, what would I advise Biden? So if Biden would be another bubble with us here in the live stream. Hey, Joe, how's it going? Get out there and share your vision of the United States under your control. We all know what it's like. And in ways, this is an adjunct of the response to Susanna, which is, we all know what we've been through for the last 4 years. And we kind of have a feeling for some memories of Obama with you as wingman. But share your concrete vision for how you'll set the nation right and what you're going to do. And analogous to Trump rolling out the Muslim ban, remember you brought that up last time, Ali, too, that I, Donald J. Trump, hereby ban all people of the Muslim faith from entering the country until we know what's going on. As almost a manifesto. I would advise to do something similar about a manifesto for America in 2020 moving forward. And pepper it with specificity. How are you going to tackle the coronavirus, Joe? What specifically are you going to do that Trump dropped the ball on? Are you going to have a mandatory mask mandate? He's afraid to say it because a mandatory national mask mandate?
He's talked about it.
He's talked about it, but I don't know. I think he needs to grow some hair on his nuts here and not be afraid to polarize people.
Okay.
and come right out and lay out his plan in terms of action, right? Mandatory masks, how he'd approach maybe even the PPE supply problem, the treatments, the vaccine distribution. Be specific and give us a vision, and then tell us what the implications are going to be. And then hit them off one by one. Coronavirus, how's he going to resuscitate the economy? I, as an American voter, and I'm pretty engaged in media, okay? I consume a lot of this stuff. I do not have a clear vision as to what the hell Biden and Harris are actually going to do. He denied the Green New Deal in the debate. That was a big talked about thing for fear of triggering these undecideds that Susanna brought up, scare the shit out of people with a $1 trillion budget, right? But the AOC and the progressive crowd have been all over that, and it's even on Joe's website. Bring us some clarity, Joe. What's your plan? What are you going to do? And what are the expected implications in a clear manifesto-like format that the media can process and distribute, and that can be the bedrock of your campaign? I'll say it again. I consume a lot of content, and I have no idea really what the hell you're going to do as president. And there are a lot of problems in this country, and you could blame Trump all you want, but I'm not hearing anything cohesive, coherent, simple, and actionable. And that's not a good thing. And that might help explain part of Susanna's question, which is, what's the message to the undecideds? In an abstract sense, are you better or worse than you were 4 years ago? In a very concrete sense, Joe's got to look into the eye of the undecided and lay out, here's what I'm going to do, and this is what the result's going to be for you, for your family, and for the country. And I don't know, Ali, are you seeing anything that's clear like this? With Trump, it was crystal clear. The Mexicans are rapists and drug addicts, and they're taking away your jobs, so we're going to build a wall. Problem, solution. Globalization has wrecked America. Unfair trade deals, taking away your jobs. I'm pulling out.
Mm-hmm. Look.
Where is it? Where is their story?
I agree with you.
Where is the Democratic story?
I agree with you, and this has been kind of frustrating for me. And
it doesn't exist, bro. And this is why I'm scared. With Trump, we know exactly what we're going to get.
Right. So,
and he's crystal clear about it, even if he's full of shit. And the Democrats, they don't want to upset anybody. And I can't talk about the Green Deal because then these people have triggered it's too expensive, you know? And,
so
I can't talk about packing the court. Can't talk about it. So I'm going to skirt the issue.
So I think the story has to be, and this is where I actually think Nancy Pelosi is one of the best politicians out there, just in terms of how she pulled off 2018, when a lot of these dominoes started falling and started going in favor of the Democrats. And what she did was she actually had a story, and I think that he should adopt that story. And you're right. You're right.
Where is it?
I know.
Who's the good guy? Who's the bad guy?
So let me just explain what my thinking on this is. You know, since you asked me.
Yeah, please. I mean, go ahead. I'm raging here because I'm so pissed off.
I know. In 2016, I always said that, you know, when you looked at this is about storytelling. We talked about the hero story and all of that.
Where is it?
We are in 2016. Hillary Clinton, right, had basically she was a policy wonk, and she had a PDF with a list of bullet points. Right? And that's just not compelling. On the other hand, Trump had, build the wall,
so powerful, man.
Everything, ban the Muslims.
Ban the Muslims, build the wall, pull out of the trade agreements.
Right. So
Obamacare is a disaster. The Iran trade deal is a travesty. Boom, boom, boom.
Make America great again. That was his story.
Fucking A.
So there's a story there, and there wasn't. Now, the thing is, Biden, he won the primaries by not being Bernie. And now if he wins the presidency, he's going to win the presidency by not being Trump.
Pretty much.
What's happening with Biden.
Yeah.
The question is that going to be enough? I don't think that's enough. I think you're right. I think he does need a story. I think he needs to sit down with Pelosi and see what they did in 2018, which is they made it all about the healthcare. Okay, they talked about healthcare. And just the future of everybody, like in terms of healthcare, especially now that the COVID pandemic is, you've got the empathy story and the healthcare story, and that really, really, and the jobs thing, that really should be the top thing, but it needs to be weaved out in a very, very definitive way.
Yes, specificity.
Right? We need to protect
specificity.
Like, for example, supposing, and I'm just throwing this out there, right? You do strategy, I do strategy at work. We used to work at the same company. So, this idea that protect your future. Like, supposing they have a slogan like that, and just throwing it out, protect your future, right? Like your Social Security, these guys are going to take it away. Your healthcare, they're going to take it away. Your Medicare, they're going to take it away. Like, protect it. Your jobs, protect your kids' future. Like, if you have a slogan like that, you have something. Like, there's a story.
I'm giving you the Mussolini jowls.
Yeah. When you're talking about Bruce Willis, I was thinking, a
little Bruce Willis, but now I'm getting a little older. So if I get the right,
I like it.
Little Marlon Brando,
protecting America's future, something like that. If there is some sort of, and you're right, I need that now. We all need that, but it's also true that it does seem like, in this case, because it's unprecedented. Take the Clorox shot. It's unprecedented. It does seem like it may actually be enough for Biden to just not be Trump. But to your point,
true. We'll put him in a bunker.
Yeah, he's doing really well. But over the next 4 weeks, you're right. Now he's got COVID. If he spins this, if he takes that empathy thing that I know what you went through, now I'm going to fight it. if this whole thing turns around, it is risky.
And the vaccine is coming, bro. The vaccine, he's already like, manhandling the FDA. And then it's so much so that a community of epidemiologists and researchers got together and they made a public statement saying that we're not being biased here. We're going to go through every evidence-based protocols and we're going to do all that. And that was just like, they were so slammed that they felt they had to do this. But you can count on a limited distribution, emergency accelerated vaccine for small target populations like healthcare workers and people at really high risk to be approved and out before this election.
Actually, yeah, I know.
And then so Trump's going to be like, I really feel empathy and we have done our best. And now here's and when people hear vaccine, they don't read the byline. Trump brought us the vaccine. So he might have killed 250,000 people.
It happens on his watch. Yeah,
it happened on. You can say what you can about this guy fucking it up, but look, about the shit that really counts, he made a miracle, man.
Yeah.
So this whole COVID thing, again, a weakness into a strength, which is what this guy does.
Mm-hmm. So I gotta tell you something I know about the vaccine too later, but I can't say it on the air.
Okay.
Eventually I'll be able to. Okay. Next, the last thing I want to talk about. Okay, first let me get through some of the comments so we can end it.
Yeah.
And address them really quick. So Susanna, if you don't know, Susanna was ex-Antifa, so she was actually part of Antifa.
Oh, fascinating.
She was a guest on our Secular Jihadist podcast, talking about cult mentality and what it took to break out of there. And she's talking about they make beams about how their back box is a brick through a cop car. They don't even fuck about the election.
Oh, totally. That's 100%.
It's not ballot. Most of them are fundamentally opposed to voting. So
most of the progressive dickheads I know feel exactly the same way. They're not throwing bricks at people.
Don't say progressive, because I consider myself and I consider a lot of us liberals progressive. It's like they've hijacked. I would call them. There's something else. There's like
I agree, but they similarly don't give a shit about the outcome. They just want both Antifa and a lot of progressives want revolution right now.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
And they're both equally destructive. The progressives, if they vote, less so. But many of these progressives are diffusing this election analogously to 2016. I mean, read the memes and shit that are online. Explosive stuff. Liberals who are casting aside their vote. Yeah. Right? A non-vote for Biden is a vote for Trump.
Right. She's talking about why are Dems so bad at marketing, and this is true. Number one example of this, Susanna, like this time that I've seen, is defund the police, redistribution of funds from police to other things.
Restructure the police, you dumbasses. Look at
If you have to explain a slogan that much, if you have to explain it so much, then it's just not a good.
Look at what happened in Minneapolis. With the board there, if you know that whole backstory, it is unbelievable idiocy, right? They freaked out the minority populations in the city. What are you gonna take the cops away?
Yeah,
talk about a gift to Trump.
Yeah, and
you don't need Bill Barr when you have a bunch of progressive maniacs demanding revolution on the eve of an election. And Bill Barr is sending these people thank you letters.
You know why Biden is not embracing the defund the police initiative is because he knows that he's got a lot of support from African Americans, and most of them don't want.
Yeah. And not just that, but he freaks the shit out of the swing state uneducated white voters too that he needs to win over, right?
Last question. We've got just a couple of minutes, so I'm sorry I'm kind of rushing through this, but this is an important one, and I just really want to know what you have to say on it. So go off on this for a couple of minutes. And this is about that whole thing about that Trump is not going to leave. He's not going to abdicate. He's pretty much guaranteed not to concede. Mark saying, Mookie, with Trump's refusal to abdicate should he lose, is it even enough to eke out a victory? It's likely he'll complain of being unfairly treated. And there will be need of a landslide to really win.
100%. We have not mentioned the corruption. We haven't mentioned the stuff with the U.S. Postal Service and the mail-in ballots. We haven't talked about voter suppression and the various techniques that are going to be used. So we haven't really talked about that as another tipping point. But to your great point, Mars, it's going to be scary if Biden does not overwhelmingly win. If there's any ambiguity whatsoever, Trump is going to milk that ad nauseum and ad infinitum, and it's going to be scary, and it's going to be bad. And even if he hands over the reins eventually, he'll just use that to cascade into the Trump media empire, so he could be the bandito and martyr of the MAGA cause. And who knows what's really going to happen. There was that Atlantic story about the Electoral College and how none of this is really written into law. If Trump's taught us anything with regard to the executive branch and the essential structures of the American system, so much of what we've taken for granted as being a lawful jurisdiction of American power and authority and governance is really just etiquette and protocol. Good faith. And good faith. And this guy shits all over everything. And the underpinning of the Electoral College and how it functions is similarly based on good faith. So who knows what could happen? And to your great point, unless Biden's victory is just screamingly, overwhelmingly obvious, if there's any points of contention, I mean, the Bush-Gore issue boiled down to Florida. Yeah. This election is going to cascade across multiple states, many of them central to an electoral defeat or victory.
And they're going to go to the Supreme Court.
It's hell's bells, and it's utterly terrifying.
He has legal teams. He has legal teams right now.
Yes.
Right now, preparing to contest close battleground states.
And he's market conditioned it. He comes out and he says the election's going to be fraudulent based on no real facts, just to get everyone ready for what's to come, which is him contesting the result. And this reinforces even more strongly our conversation over the last 2 hours as to why this guy continues to be a much bigger threat to the Democrats than he appears. Mm-hmm. Because he's got a much better chance of winning, liberals. I'm talking to you, libs. Let me get in the camera here with my finger. Than you think. And he's pulling these shenanigans. So you could say he's going to win, and he's likely to win, but to Mara's great point, by how much? And when he does lose, to Bill Maher's point, is he even going to get the fuck out of there? That's a big question, and that's a big problem, and it's unprecedented.
It's unprecedented. What a great way to end it. And it's right. I mean, he's going to have like 3 Supreme Court. The amazing thing is he's just saying it openly. He's like, "Oh no, we need another Supreme Court justice."
Of course,
of the election.
But that's the guy's strength. He just shoots that shit right out because he doesn't care. He can do whatever he wants, and it enrages the opposition, but also energizes anyone who's remotely excited by an authoritarian motherfucker who does whatever he wants for my security. Mm-hmm. The bigger an asshole this guy is, the more secure I feel, because I know he hates the people I hate, and he's going to protect me and the country because he's such an asshole. He's going to probably be an asshole to the people fighting us and the people who want to do us harm. So I'm going to vote for him. I don't like him, and he's a jerk. And he's selfish and narcissistic, but I feel safer if I vote for him. So sorry, Sleepy Joe. That's what I fear.
Everybody, last thing I'm going to say on this is that Trump keeps on talking about the problems with mail-in voting. Here's the real problem with mail-in voting. The rejection rates are much, much higher for mail-in ballots than they are for regular ballots.
Especially in states where you need like 2 adults over the age of 18 to sign your fucking ballot.
Right.
The New York Times just did an expose state by state. If you have a chance, Google machine it. It's astonishing that there are many, many states that have so many loopholes that you need to dot your T's and cross your I's about for even submitting a ballot. Some states are automatic, like New Jersey. You just show up and boom. Mm-hmm. Other states is tooth and nail, designed to keep your minority ass from voting.
530,000.
And you know why it's not going to change? Because the Republicans own the judiciary. And you know why? Because of Hillary's emails.
Yeah, because of Hillary's emails. That's why they own the judiciary. 530,000 mail-in ballots were rejected in the primaries. Rejected because mismatched signatures, missing signatures, envelopes not done properly. A whole bunch of they didn't get there on time. A whole bunch of reasons. So that is a real problem with mail-in ballots. So we know what to do.
Don't do it.
Go
in person.
Physical distancing. Yeah. Wear your mask. Take your sanitizer. Go out there and vote in person. Like fuck this mail-in ballot stuff. Anybody's asking you to do it. Sure. If you have to do it, if you are obviously there's something.
If your vote's not going to get cast, like the lines are like a light year long because the Republican setup basically eliminated 90% of your polling stations.
Or if you live in a state that only has mail-in ballot voting.
Right, so right. If you got to do it, go for it. But vote in person if you can.
Go vote in person.
Yeah.
And we'll end on that. Like all of this is all very unprecedented.
Yeah. Vote in person. Don't take this maniac for granted.
He can still win.
Be afraid. Be afraid. This is really a mess. It's a real mess, and all we can do is focus and not listen to the polls.
Be afraid, be hopeful.
Right.
Don't be complacent. That's it.
And don't pay attention to the polls.
Don't pay attention. No. I think we disagree on that. Anyway, we're going to end on that note, everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Ali, for hosting me. I really appreciate for providing this awesome forum, connecting with people.
Yeah, let's do it again.
Let's do it again soon. It's a lot of fun. And we're eager for your feedback. So comments below, and then we could take it where we left off. And at this rate of change in the news, anything could happen in the next 12 minutes. So the next milestone marker, let's chalk up another one.
All right. That's great, everybody. Thank you very much. And we'll see you next time. Bye.
Okay. Thank you. Bye.